just immediately begin with our Democracy in Action Award. And I'd like to call up, was it Nancy? Were you? Oh, my mother. My mother's going to get, so actually the award, Kitty Lou's here, who couldn't make it here today, was going to originally give the presentation, but this is her presentation.
I'm the mother of outgoing presidents.
All right.
David Beard. Okay, I'm going to say some words for you. If they're wrong, I didn't do the research. Okay. My name is Shirley Rosenbaum, and I am the mother of the outgoing president. And he has a new talent that's coming into play. Should I tell them?
Oh, you mean my next?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell.
He was just nominated president of the state board of the League of Women Voters. But I think he will have less work because they only meet 4 times a year. We meet all the time.
It's going to be much more challenging.
Today, we're giving the League's Award for Democracy in Action to David Beard, a reporter and editor at the Dominion Post. David grew up in Philadelphia and then moved to the Pacific Northwest following 2 years of college. There he met his wife and they raised 3 children in Seattle. If anything is wrong, you can tell me later. Okay. David graduated from the University of Washington with honors in English and education in 1986, and he began work in journalism as a reporter and an editor. He taught college journalism for 6 years and then got the job at the Dominion Post. While there, he has worked as a copy editor, copy desk chief, managing editor. Did you also deliver coffee? He is currently the legislative and energy reporter. His reporting on the West Virginia legislature over the years has been wonderful, and it's been an asset for the readers of the Dominion Post. David has received awards from the Society of Professional Journalists, the Pennsylvania Newspaper Association, and the West Virginia Press Association. We are giving David this award today because of his thorough and knowledgeable reporting of the West Virginia legislature. And I'm a daily read. When you're in, I'm reading your column. David has given readers of the Dominion Post detailed information on important bills proposed at the time, which bills local legislators are sponsoring, information on committee hearings, and coverage of interims and special sessions. He is currently writing about the special session on the budget, educating voters about the workings of our legislature and about the actions of the legislators that we chose is actually democracy in action. Therefore, we have chosen David for our annual Democracy in Action Award. Come on up. Congratulations, David. I work on the education for the state board, and I follow a lot of the things that are going on that we've had. So we welcome you, and we'd like to have you speak, but I have something for you. Okay. See, can you see it?
Yes.
Oh, let's hold it up. Why don't you hold it?
Repeat tomorrow's paper.
Can you do that? No, it's just different name.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, it's a real honor to receive this, and I appreciate it. I think my goal when I go down there is to just try to present information to keep people informed so they can make responsible choices and hold their legislators accountable. And so I guess this reflects that I've been successful to some degree. And my first full session was the 2010 session. And that's such a huge building, and there's so much going on all at once that for the first couple of weeks I was just totally overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. And I felt every night I would go home or go back to my apartment, like my stomach tied in knots because I felt like I was failing because I wasn't covering enough. But what I learned and what I tell people that come down there now from other papers is you just got to accept your limitations, realize you can't do it all, and pick and choose what you think is the best. And hopefully, if you're maybe pick wrong, don't kill yourself over it, just change course. But I try to balance coverage of the big issues like the budget, or a few years back, the fracking bill or the water above ground tank bill, because that's a statewide issue. And I also try to focus on local things that maybe nobody in the Panhandle or Southern West Virginia would be interested in, people in the Morgantown area are. And I thought I could try to concentrate somewhat in that too. And I always try to say how our local delegates voted, although I forgot to do that on my last story on the tax bill, so sorry about that. There are reporters who, there's no such thing as an objective reporter. Everybody has a worldview. And so your worldview slants how you see things and how you process them. But when you have to acknowledge that you're not going to be objective and try to present your information truthfully. And I've known reporters who, and there's still a few there who I think go into the job with an agenda, and they try to slant what they write so that you see things their way, whether that's the way it is or not. And I've been covered events where another reporter was there and I read his or her story and you wouldn't know we were at the same thing. So what I try to do is just, I always read the bills I write about. Sometimes I know the bills better than the legislators that are voting on them. And I just want to sit there in the committee meeting and raise my hand and tell them what the answer is. So I always read the bills I write about, and I try to present not what I think people should think, but I try to present what really goes on in the meeting, what people talk about, and what the actual content of the bill is. Because that way, you as the readers know what's going on and know how to make your own decision about whether you support a bill or not, and whether you want to call up your delegate or your senator and tell them what to do or what not to do. And trying to be fair about things doesn't mean that I can't, sometimes I'll adopt an issue just because it's something that I know no one else is going to write about. But I think it's important, and that doesn't mean I slant my writing about it, I still present it truthfully. But I just want people to be aware that something is going on. A couple examples would be, I don't know how many years back it was, but the autism insurance bill, so that parents could get their children, it's called, I think, applied behavioral analysis. And I covered basically every meeting that dealt with that and wrote about it. And I think most of the time I was the only reporter there. And then more recently, there was a issue going on, it actually lasted for several years, between advanced practice registered nurses and physicians. And the nurses were trying to increase their scope of practice. And I actually talked to one of the leaders about that, and I thought, well, this is interesting. This is something people should know about. And so I covered it for 2 to 3 years. And then unfortunately, it was not this session, but the session before last, is when finally all the negotiations came to a head and they resolved it. And I was frustrated because it was the new committee leaders were there and they didn't know how to organize their meetings. And so every time that bill came up and I wanted to write about it, I had to go leave the meeting and go cover something else that unfortunately was more important. And so I didn't get to sit in for the end of it, but I tried to do it for several years. I think I don't want to keep rambling on. I think that's kind of what I wanted to cover. If anybody has any questions, I'll answer them, but otherwise I'll sit down and get on to the next thing.
So what gives you the most fun? What fun do you have by doing it?
I don't like being told what to do. I like being able to set my own schedule and choose what I do.
Sure.
And down there, I'm pretty much a free agent. I just tell my bosses what I'm doing, and they say, okay. And I don't have to. You run on pure adrenaline down there because you don't get any sleep. You work 12, 13, 14 hours a day. In fact, I had a short day yesterday. I only worked 11. And And so you're running on energy. I'll sit down and I'm eating food with one hand and answering emails with my other hand, literally. Where was I going? What was the fun part? Oh, but anyway, it's just the energy and the independence, and just the chance to do my own thing, but still kind of be a public servant in my own way. Right. Well, thank you very much again for this.
Right. So the next part of today's program, we're going to have a guest speaker, and Aisha and Bill Austin, the MPO, and you. I'll just quickly introduce the subject matter. As far back as the 1960s, the League has favored the adoption and implementation of comprehensive plans for Morgantown and Monongalia County. So, meaning a comprehensive plan for, or any of its parts, such as a comprehensive plan of land use or thoroughfares. And I actually took that out of one of our consensus positions. And so established in 2003, the Morgantown-Monongalia Metropolitan Planning Organization, which we'll refer to as the MPO, is a federally designated transportation planning agency for Morgantown and Monongalia County, serving as a regional partnership among the West Virginia Department of Transportation, local transit agencies, local elected leadership, local planning and public works directors, the business community, and citizens. With great enthusiasm, I introduce today's guest speaker, Bill Austin, who is the executive director of the MPO. And so basically, before coming to Morgantown in 2009, Bill Austin worked for 4 MPOs in various capacities in Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, and West Virginia. His transportation expertise led him to be part of the consultant team for the Miami-Dade Expressway Authority, preparing traffic and revenue studies for proposed facilities in Florida. So our league has long been concerned about improving traffic conditions in Morgantown and the surrounding area, including pedestrian and cyclist safety. We are very pleased that Bill Austin will give us an overview of the MPO. We are interested in how the new transportation plan was developed, how the public was involved, major concerns identified in the plan, and what we can expect to see coming out of the plan. So, you are invited.
Thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I'll give you a little bit of background about where MPOs came from. MPOs are federally mandated, and it really came out of the urban renewal movement back in the 1950s and particularly the 1960s, where transportation funds were used to try and redevelop communities in what they believed was their best interest. But a lot of times what it was the State Department of Transportation would come in and look at an area and say, this is a low-income area and it needs to be redeveloped. And they would, in many instances, wipe out very vibrant community, albeit low-income communities, with the idea that going in and building new housing for them would raise the standard of living among the inhabitants, which really didn't happen. That's really the genesis of a lot of the public housing woes we've experienced since that time. MPOs were developed to represent local communities to the state and federal governments. And so we are mandated to have MPOs for any urban area with a population of 50,000 or more. Small MPOs, which I've worked for primarily, are between 50,000 and 200,000. A large MPO is over 200,000, and they have a little bit more say in how funding is spent. An MPO's 2 primary jobs really for the public is, one, to develop the urban areas long-range transportation plan, which I'll talk about that quite a bit, and the other is no federal surface transportation funds can be spent within the urban area being run by the MPO, being covered by the MPO, without the approval of the MPO's policy board. It's a document called the Transportation Improvement Program, and if it's not, if in the Transportation Improvement Program, the state can't use federal funds to do it. And what the MPO policy board does is if the state proposes a project or they propose one of the projects in our long-range plan, our policy board says that that project is in agreement with the MPO's long-range transportation plan. That is the only stick that a small MPO like ours has to try and get projects implemented. Yes, ma'am.
What does MPO stand
Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Thank you. I missed that.
And with us, we're the MPO. MPO. Well, yeah, Morgantown-Monongalia. But anyway,
But it's primarily transportation.
it is completely transportation.
Okay.
Part of what we are to do is to coordinate with local land use plans. And when we developed our 2012-2013 long-range transportation plan, you may have seen we were doing a joint project with the city of Morgantown because they were updating their comprehensive plan at the same time, and Star City. And so we had joint effort where we had group meetings with a lot of public involvement that we shared land use planning and transportation planning goals and objectives as we were working. So we were trying to get the city's comprehensive plan and Star City's comprehensive plan to work well with our long-range transportation plan. And Monongalia County at the same time, they only do a limited number of area of comprehensive planning. We were informed of the goals and objectives, and they did feed into our long-range transportation plan as we were moving forward. But they did a separate comprehensive planning effort.
And so did you go to Bow Park and have stations at Bow Park that people could
Yeah.
visit?
Yeah, we had public meetings at University High, North Elementary School, South Middle School, and throughout the region. We had several meetings. We had one at the multimodal facility located on campus at WVU at the hospital. We had a very extensive public involvement process as we went forward with that and did that joint planning effort. So my policy board is made up of elected officials from all of the urban areas communities, 3 representatives from the city of Morgantown, the 3 county commissioners, and 1 each from Granville, Westover, Star City, and actually Blacksville. We also have a representative from Mountain Line Transit. Dave Bruffy represents Mountain Line Transit. Ron Justice represents West Virginia University. And Mike Kelly also represents the Board of Education. So we have a 14-member board that we work for. We're a very small agency. We're actually technically a standalone agency as far as funding goes. We're not county employees, we're not city employees, and there are only 2 of us, so it's not like it's big, but we are actually located in the county courthouse downtown. The county's kind enough to provide us with facilities, and we really appreciate that. Our job is to be independent and to try and bring everybody together to reach a consensus on transportation issues, and we work very hard at that. We recently updated our long-range transportation plan. We had 1 public meeting to validate the goals and objectives that we developed in 2013 through the Crossroads effort that we did. We also did a public survey, which we had 725 respondents to survey online or in paper. I think only about 30 of those were paper responses, but that's a very good response when you're getting people to respond. And for example, we had open-ended questions like, where would you like to see, or your top 5 locations for pedestrian improvements, or your top 5 locations for automobile improvements. And we got excellent responses to those. And it took us a long time to get all that put together, but we did. And we validated our goals and objectives, identified additional concerns from what we found in our Crossroads effort in 2012 and 2013, and we developed a new long-range transportation plan. And I'll give you copies. I don't have copies for everyone, but this is our update. The actual 2012 plan that we updated consisted of one book, which is about 130 pages with 5 appendices each. If you'll just pass those around. We can see that. We did this as and this is available online at our website, plantogether.org.
Thank you.
Sure. And this is, I have several copies of these. These are actually the map that you see there. Yeah. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about is one of our primary goals and objectives is to have a multimodal transportation system. And that means we need to accommodate vehicular traffic, we need to accommodate pedestrian traffic, and we need to accommodate cyclists.
Get one more map.
Sure. Like there's several of you. If you want to pass them around, and I have cards if you want to contact me and get them, or as I said, they are available on our website.
Okay, thank you. Let me give it to you. You go ahead and take that. Thank you.
And also transit. We do work with transit. Transit's a very important part of what we do. One of the interesting statistics that I find people find interesting is between 16 and 20% of work trips within our urban area are made by something other than the automobile. That's people walking to work, that's people riding bicycles to work, that's people using transit systems, Mountain Line, or the PRT. PRT carries about 16,000 trips, between 16 and 20,000 trips a day. That's about what University Avenue carries. So for us, alternative transportation is a large part of our transportation network. And I know everybody likes to complain about all the congestion. Well, imagine if you didn't have the PRT carrying 16,000 trips a day, and you didn't have Mountain Line. Mountain Line carries on the order of about 10,000 to 12,000 trips a day, making those trips. How would people get around? If you think you had gridlock now, get rid of pedestrians and those other forms of transportation. You know, for every 4 vehicles out there, you'd see another vehicle when you're driving without some kind of alternative transportation. So it is important to keeping our transportation network to have those alternative modes. So I often get a question, well, why are you interested in sidewalks? Why are you interested in facilitating people riding bicycles? Well, for one thing, the system would clog without it. Another thing, it's healthier. It's better for clean air, it's healthier. I know I feel better when I walk with exercise. So there's a lot of good reasons to incorporate those alternative modes of transportation into our long-range transportation plan. And what you see now is primarily the automobile portion of our transportation plan. We actually have a bicycle plan that we've worked on with the Morgantown Bicycle Committee. And also we are going to be updating the Morgantown pedestrian plan in our work program later this coming fiscal year, the second half of this coming fiscal year. So we look at making the entire network work for everybody, because not only is it the right thing to do, but the system really wouldn't work well without it. We have limitations with geography, we have limitations with right-of-ways, we have limitations with community consensus. And making all that work is a real challenge. But we have had some success. The Mile Ground Widening Project, which is ongoing, was originally the West Virginia 705 Connector Project. And that was originally to go from Stewartstown Road down over to the bottom of Easton Hill through what is currently now developed across that West Run development. All of those developments on Restaurant precluded putting a new road through there. So we developed a consensus that widening the Mile Ground was going to be the only alternative to provide additional highway capacity through that area. There was a lot of concerns about how that should look, and that actually slowed down the process, and building the community consensus on that took a while. But it is an ongoing project, and the roundabout located at the Mile Ground and West Virginia 705 was the first part of that project. The Easton Hills segment of that project is ongoing, and that should be completed by the end of this summer. And then the center section, they are currently doing right-of-way acquisition for widening that to 5 lanes. And there will be a signal at the intersection with Hartman Run and the Mile Around. It's not a perfect solution, but it will certainly help traffic. Yes, ma'am.
So this project encompasses the entire county rather than within city limits?
The boundaries for our MPO is actually the county limits, but typically MPOs work within what's known as the SMSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area. But just for convenience sake, our boundary is Monongalia County. But that's why we're multi-jurisdictional.
So are there people representing outside of these counties on the board? Because I know
No,
my
our
house
board.
is outside of any county,
City.
So,
city limits.
Yeah, you submit
yeah,
city.
well, the county commissioner, there are 3 county commissioners on our board, as well as Joe Statler, who is actually a member of the House of Delegates, represents Blacksville. So that's how we're made up. But anyway, there are a lot of other projects that are ongoing that we worked on that you won't see. For example, you may have seen barrels on Mon Boulevard between Coliseum and Boyers Avenue. There's a project to widen Mon Boulevard to 5 lanes, install a sidewalk on the east side, and to put a bicycle climbing lane on the west side, the Coliseum side. That project will be constructed next year. The work you're seeing ongoing now is actually the utility work and drainage work.
So where is Mon Boulevard that you're talking about?
In front of the Coliseum.
To where?
From the Coliseum to Boyers Avenue.
Oh, that's Star City. Towards Star City.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to going down the hill where it goes from, what, from 5 lanes to 4 lanes to, what, 2.5 lanes?
That's Beechhurst Avenue.
Well, it's all the same to me, but, okay.
Well,
research.
Yeah, I was talking about ongoing projects that are being constructed. We're actually doing a study on Beechhurst Avenue now. But I'll be happy to discuss that too.
Well, it seems to me you're working on the wrong end of the problem, you know. I mean,
You're getting people out of town quickly.
I guess that's
which is
good.
Well, if you take a look at it, that whole corridor is congested. What we do have programmed is a $7.5 million, and I was going to talk about that. If you'll take a look at the program projects list at the top there, the orange ones, you'll see Beechhurst Avenue Spot Improvement Project. And what that is there's not a consensus within the community to go in and bulldoze over all of those buildings along Beechhurst and take out the tax base. And so what we have is $7.5 million programmed to make spot improvements to that end to make it operate better. There are things you can do with intersections. There is some widening you can do through there. And right now we are doing a planning study on what those improvements should be. That project is scheduled for construction in 2020. And the engineering for that project by DOH is scheduled to begin in 2018. And so we're doing a planning study now where we're studying the traffic operations, doing microsimulation modeling based on turning movement counts, volume counts, as well as observation to determine what cross-section will fit in there and still accommodate the land use.
There's a highway in New York, Long Island Expressway. And it ran through a cemetery, so it was restricted how far you could spread out, so they did this. Maybe that's what you need to do at Beechhurst, real simple. I think Sam Chico would support that.
Well, actually, I was wondering if some people with power decide that, no, you're not going to do this to Beechhurst.
What happens is there is, and we work on community consensus, what we will do is we will do a microsimulation of how the corridor operates currently. We're doing that, we call it existing conditions. and then we will come up with proposed alternatives. We'll bring them out to the public and get feedback on that, and that feedback will go to the decision makers. We are very much focused on public involvement and public outreach, which is not always popular with some of the decision makers, but that's what we do.
So was your organization, I remember hearing and getting an email about how there was going to be a road, a bridge going across the Arboretum. And I
No
mean,
way.
That was around Christmas time, I think, last year, and it went ballistic.
Oh yeah, we
And that
received
was-
about 235 emails
Right, I was
on that issue. That's fine. And what that was if you take a look at the 2012-2013 long-range transportation plan, we had identified 3 potential access points to provide additional access to I-79. That location, potentially at the Arboretum, was one of them. We had one that was actually 8th Street, which I think has been discussed in the community for a long time. And in fact, when I first interviewed here, that looked like a natural solution to me. And then one on the northern end, which had been talked about for a long time as well. We did a study last year. Actually, it wrapped up this year, but it was taking place last year, where we determined that the northern alternative was the most feasible alternative at this point. And it includes an extension of Van Voorhees Road, and then you basically take a left turn and go across the river and put in a new interchange. And if you take a look at the map that I passed out, you can see it. Up here, I forget which color is it. That's kind of a brownish color. You can see what that is the recommended alternative for that. Now, the thing to remember is that's number 6, yes. That is not set in stone where that's going to do. What we did was a study that justifies the project, that defines the purpose and need for the project. The next step would be to get a NEPA process starting, National Environmental Protection Act process started, where they identified the on-ground corridor. At this point, all we were trying to do was narrow down the alternatives. And so when you heard about the Arboretum, it was simply one of, we ended up studying 12 alternatives with some sub-alternatives, so it became 14 different alternatives by the time it all worked out.
So that's no longer.
68 something.
No, ma'am.
Why was the 8th Street solution not?
Well, because what we found, it really, I mean, the key issue has been the congestion of the Star City Bridge. It's been congestion on 705, and it really wouldn't address those issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that might be considered in the future? 'Cause it seems like if you could route people over to Granville Westover earlier than the other bridge.
Yeah. And that was my initial take. We didn't find that it was cost effective.
Okay.
And I fully.
It seems like it'd be good economic development for Granville too, but.
Did you ever consider using the river and transporting all those drivers from Fairmont, you know, on a ferry?
Unfortunately, you couldn't get the traffic volumes. I'm for getting people out of cars, but if you, well, in Fort Lauderdale, where I worked for a period, they actually had a water taxi that was federally sponsored. It turned into more of a tourist facility. It doesn't really, you know, the time, the limitations imposed by public transportation is not something that much of the public is willing to accept. Being able to hop in your car and leave and go where you want to. Just using a ferry like that, I love it, it's a great idea, but it's not a viable, you know, replacement for that reason. It's public perceptions, but I encourage transit. And one of the things we've also proposed and have worked on is van pooling. And there are both federal benefits for van pools, as well as a lot of benefits to the drivers. It's a lot cheaper. And so the MPO had gotten a grant from the Division of Highways using federal congestion mitigation and air quality funding to support van pools and get them started. I believe to date we've gotten 8 started, and I believe 5 of them are still running. So that's pretty good. If you think about it, those van pools typically have about 8 riders. So 5, that's 40 trips a day each way. That's 80 trips that you're taking off the road network. And when you start looking at like the micro-simulation we'll be doing on Beechhurst Avenue, the difference between operating and sitting to have to wait another cycle to go through a traffic light can be as small as 2 or 3 cars in a 15-minute period. Because what happens is you get up and you've got that extra car that you've got to wait to go through the light and you get caught by it. So a little micro improvement like getting those 40 vehicles off of the network can have a big impact on how traffic operates on the micro level. Besides that, it's ecologically friendly. There's a lot of good things about it, but we've had some success with van pooling. And Pittsburgh, for example, uses similar funding. Our subsidy goes away after the first 6 months of subsidizing and get them used. If it's a commuter from going to Pittsburgh, their MPO subsidizes it full time for the entire extent of it. We were kind of a test case with our grant program. And I will tell you, I know of at least 8 vans that run between here and Pittsburgh that get their subsidy. So, yes, sir.
I think it's Ruby that uses vans for employees at park.
Satellite parking.
Yeah, and I think the bus schedule has been altered to help Milan employees move out.
Right.
I wonder if the university, the biggest player in this, other than their bus system, would have off-campus parking for employees. If you looked into that, thousands of employees.
I know that Ruby is looking at off-campus parking decks, and I think the university's been talking with them about it as well. They have been proactive.
Well, I know the hospital does it now, but I don't know anything about WVU doing it.
What about WVU and the students?
Well, one of the things, and WVU has actually been very proactive, and it's a item that you don't think a lot about, but it's had a huge impact actually on our numbers. Not huge, but a very good impact on our numbers. What they have done is, for a long time, if you took an English class, you had to go to the downtown campus. I'm making that up. I'm not sure exactly what the split was.
Right.
So you had to go to the downtown campus. Well, what they've started doing is offering the same English class on the Evansdale campus that they're offering on the downtown campus. So instead of students having to travel between campuses to get their prerequisite classes that may not be in their major, they're offering them in both campuses. And so that takes a lot of trips off of our network because those students are not having to go between campuses to get their prerequisite classes. And that has been, a big impact we've seen on University Avenue and several other of our facilities. The numbers drop.
Do you know anything about the WVU and the parking? Like for instance, on Maiden Lane.
Yeah,
Do you know anything about that?
I don't.
Know about that?
That's kind of. I'm more of the systems level
Okay.
planning. Yes, ma'am.
Why did the PRT not get developed further than it is? I think it's a wonderful idea. It's one of the best things around, and yet it's just sort of like it stopped.
Yeah, if you take a look at like the long range plan map we do have a PRT extension on there, actually 2 extensions, I believe. The problem is it's very expensive to build, especially with the way they built it. When they first built the piers and the supports for the PRT, they didn't know what size vehicles they were going to have running on it because the vehicles were still under development. So they built those piers and everything as if you were running a standard New York City subway car on it. A big, heavy train car, not the small PRT cars we have now. And so when they first built it, they couldn't afford to, ring the whole city with it. Now that, the cars are in existence, and they know they're smaller, and they had to be smaller because they can't make some of the turns. they can do an extension for less money. The problem is, the PRT was built in the 1970s. It is currently still operating with circuit boards that were made by Boeing in the 1970s, and in fact, the folks who manufactured them retired from Boeing, and they moved here to work on the on circuit boards. Well, those guys are really ready to retire, and so they need to replace that whole control system, and they're working on it. They need to replace the cars, the drive systems, you know.
Need to get Disney involved, they've been doing that forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 42-year-old system. Then they have a plan to do it. They've been working to get federal grant funding for that and get it done. If they get the cars done and all of that, then they can really start, or we can still start working on extending it. But it is an expensive
I
process.
still think it's one of your best things, because there's limits, land area.
Right.
So you could go up, you know.
Right.
Makes more sense to
Oh,
go up.
We fully support it. The problem is, especially in this funding environment, you have to prioritize what you want. And it's a matter of, and they say it about politics, it's the matter of what is possible. It's the art of the possible. And it's a difficult stretch at this point, because you'd be talking $50, $100 million and operating. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think I read a while back where it was going to be extended when the funds were available, but I don't remember what.
There's no schedule.
There's no schedule. I mean, well, where were they thinking about extending it? I mean, past Walnut?
It's on the map,
Oh, it is?
actually.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I think, if you take a look, rather than, it's a tier 4 project. No, I'm sorry. We did, our map is so busy, we did not actually get it on there.
Oh, okay.
But if you go to our, it basically comes around and extends parallel to West Run.
Oh, okay.
And also, we've talked about going up the hill to University Town Center
Oh, wow.
Cool.
as well. But that presents some problems with steepness, and that would be an ideal park and ride there.
Yeah.
But you might impact the Arboretum.
No.
No, don't.
You see?
No.
See, so it's a matter of community consensus on what is possible. You know, everybody says that's great, but wait a minute, it impacts the Arboretum. You can't do that.
I can't understand why it would. It already has a.
Well,
pier.
I'm sorry?
The green space.
Well, and that's the trade-off the community has to make. And so,
Would not-
you know, when you talk about these
Trade-off
things,
things.
there's a price to everything.
Actually, a friend of mine said, I said one time, those who have the power make the rules. He said, no, those who buy the power make the rules.
Well, there was an old
Right,
thing,
Absolutely.
the Wizard of Id is the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. So,
Except in this
Who has the final decision on your plan and whether it goes or doesn't go?
well, it's basically, and West Virginia is not as transparent on this as the other states I've worked in. It basically becomes a decision of the Secretary of Transportation and the governor.
Oh, good grief. Really?
That's essentially, other states, for example, when I was there, North Carolina had a board of transportation that was appointed by the governor and the legislature to represent the different districts within the state. And that board of transportation was the one that made the decisions. And they had a process where they received public input from the MPOs, from the general public and everybody, and then they would all come together, each board member representing his group, and they'd make proposals. They were each budgeted by district what they could do. And they even had a system, well, you've got a mega $100 million project, you can't do that on one district's budget for a year, so they swapped off, okay, you get the big money this year, and then my district gets it next year, that sort of thing. But there's no process like that in West Virginia.
How many MPOs are there in West Virginia?
There are 8 NPOs in West Virginia.
Who's the Secretary of Transportation?
Tom Smith is the new Secretary of Transportation. He had worked for a short time for the Appalachian Regional Commission. Before that, he was the Federal Highway Administration Administrator for the West Virginia District for about 17 years, I think, which is a very long time for a federal employee.
So do you work on ideas for extending 68, or is that a whole nother?
That has been one the MPO has not been particularly interested in. That is primarily more of an economic development project. We don't see the travel demand there for that, and so we have not been involved with it. I know the county commission and others have expressed an interest in it, but we haven't taken any real stand on or active part of that. But yeah, we do have a lot of projects going on, and for example, there will be resurfacing of West Run between Stewartstown and Cheat Road. There's a resurfacing project on Van Voorhees that will be ongoing this year. There's the project I told you about on Mon Boulevard. Next year they will be reconstructing the intersection of Greenbag Road and West Virginia 7, right there at Hardee's. They'll be realigning that. Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking about this intersection the other day, so how are they gonna rearrange it?
They're basically going to tee it off and
Rather than the
roundabout.
complicated, okay. The cursive T.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, that's just a nightmare when you look at it, and people getting stuck, hung up in there. And they're also looking a little bit more comprehensively, which we've encouraged, at that whole West Virginia 7 corridor, because even if you fix that intersection, there are other issues there.
What about putting a roundabout there?
They really studied that in depth, and they determined for cost effectiveness that keeping it signalized worked the best, but adding capacity to it. And that's kind of like what we're talking about with Beechhurst Avenue, is fixing those kinds of things.
Would you speak to the timing of resurfacing? It seemed like, it was last year.
I'm sorry?
It seemed like last year, when the students returned, they started blacktopping. I think maybe it was Beechhurst.
I think
the timing.
the state actually was pretty much on time with most of theirs. A lot of that was with the city, new resurfacing project, their new funding, and they made the mistake of giving the contractors a little too much leeway. The contractors also did have to pay liquidated damages because they were behind schedule. The city actually fined them for not meeting the schedule and being done before the students came back. So that was more of a, we did our best, and it was the city primarily rather than the state. And the Beechhurst project, everybody was all up in arms, actually was completed before the students got back. It was only a couple of days, but but they actually did pull it off.
They did.
Yeah.
I have one more question. My focus when I moved back in September, I've been really interested in getting a sidewalk all along Dorsey, and I see that that's on the plan. Is that from Greenbag Road all the way downtown?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Essentially it is. It is currently not a priority at this point.
Yeah, I see it's pretty far down the list.
Yeah, but it is on the plan, and the city is working to implement that piecemeal. As that area redevelops, they are having the developers, and you'll see it, there's sidewalk that's going in. So they are working on that.
Okay.
There was one I was going to mention. Slipped what little mind I have.
And are all the sidewalks going to be handicap accessible?
They are required to be ADA compliant. And the state really suffered a lot of egg on their face with the Beechhurst restriping project because they weren't ADA compliant. And that went all the way to Washington. And they do have a project funded to do that. That's what I was going to mention. With the Beechhurst study, we are actually doing 3 different tiers of study. One is the spot improvements, $7.5 million. What can you get done for that? The next tier is, well, okay, if we can squeeze some more money out of it, what can we do? Kind of an intermediate. And then there's if if we had all the money in the world, what could we do? And so we'll be presenting those 3 scenarios to the decision makers when we do the public outreach. Yes, ma'am.
Are there plans in any of this for bicycle lanes or access for bicycles? Because I was surprised to hear that that Morgantown was a bike-friendly city, but I hardly ever see any bikes.
I don't know where they got it.
Where they got that was because of their educational efforts. And they do a lot of outreach and training of cyclists. And that's one of the key things with an area with all the narrow right-of-ways we have is you have to have smart cyclists. And so that's how they got that designation. That was their primary thing. We do have a bike plan. Working with the Division of Highways, they're not particularly bicycle friendly. They're not going to put in a lot of bike lanes. But you heard, for example, on Mon Boulevard, we do have a climbing lane planned coming up from Star City. We've been trying to get a climbing lane on the other side of the hill, but with the rock slides and the so forth that's going on there, that hasn't done. But our bike plan is primarily focused at identifying bicycle-friendly streets and routes to get around town so cyclists know where to go, where it's friendly, and putting up signs, share the road signs, those kinds of things to make motorists aware of cyclists. And we do have some proposed other places for bicycle lanes and all of that kind of thing, but you work within the restrictions you have. And I can empathize. A lot of the complaints you hear is, why is my pothole not fixed? Or, well, you're putting money into fixing bike lanes, you're not fixing my potholes. And so that's the kind of thing that you hear from the public, and it's a trade-off. They don't understand that there are certain funds, transportation alternative program funds, that are eligible for bicycles. They're not eligible to fix potholes. People, that's a little too fine point of an argument to make with people, but that's really what happens. A lot of times when you see things going on, why are you doing that? Well, because the funding's eligible for that. It's not eligible to fix your potholes.
That would make a good letter to the editor.
There's a lot of dirt being moved on the west side of I-79. Are you planning around that? I heard rumors that it's going to be a new WVU football stadium over there at some point. I don't know it. I mean, if that's true or not, but
I have heard nothing to confirm that. That's a rumor that I've heard, but that is really part of the TIF district that the county commission is working on, and it is being funded by anticipated future tax monies. And so if you think about it, to put a football stadium which doesn't pay any taxes over there would probably be counterproductive as far as paying for the infrastructure that they're putting in. Now, it's a 2-tier TIF district where they're collecting sales tax as well as property taxes. And so a football stadium sells a lot of beer. So it may make sense, but to me it would be counterintuitive for that to happen.
what about all the development that's evidently going to occur over there? They're moving a lot of dirt from west over up through Granville, and who knows where. Does that impact 79? I think it obviously does.
Well, and we
changes and
and well, as I said, when you take a look at the new bridge that we're talking about, that's north there.
right.
And the state has a project funded to improve around the Chaplain Hill Road interchange. It's primarily from the TIF district. And the TIF district is building its own road network, which we're aware of, but we're not actually planning. That's being planned by the developer.
Developers?
The developers in the TIF district.
Are they
But we're aware of that, and they're actually working with our regional travel demand model. We stay coordinated with them.
Are there any women on your board?
Let's see, Jenny Celine and Marty Schamberger, and Mayor Patty Lewis
Mayor?
of Granville.
Granville.
Those are the 3 that leap to mind. Yeah. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer any questions, and I have some cards if anybody would like them.
How long have you been here?
Oh, I came in 2009. I will have been here 8 years, June 1st.
How about improvements on Route 7 going to Blacksville? A lot of people use that road, and it's pretty dangerous.
I actually wrote it with Joe Statler, and we were talking about, you know, the county commission worked to get legislation passed where you could potentially have a local 1%, up to 1% sales tax to fund local transportation improvements. And I actually went out and looked at that route, and there are a few places where you can make a significant difference, but there are actually not that many. In anticipation of, that might be an area that we would talk about with a potential referendum.
Yeah, I drove there, I was driving that road last Sunday up to Pennsylvania, to the garden
Right.
place, and it's black-topped and marked and everything, really pretty, just so far, and then,
But,
boom, and there you, oh dear.
and then you get to Wetzel County and it's nice again. It's
So it
kind of
makes-
odd how that
yeah,
works.
it makes no sense to me that that doesn't,
Yeah.
you know.
And that's one thing we hear the most complaints about, but actually, local legislators and DOH have more input. As I said, I'm more the long-range guy. The maintenance, the only time we ever really discuss it is when they want to use federal maintenance funds, and then my policy board approves them. But we don't actually schedule them or have any say in why that gets done.
The other thing is, I used to drive to Doddridge County very often, and I would get to Doddridge County, the old country roads were wonderful. Well,
I know.
Equitable Gas was paying, all of these gas companies were paying for their trucks and get the potholes fixed pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those private initiatives, especially the gas industry, because it's worth their while to have a good quality road. And they will actually pay for those. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Okay.